The persistent international calls for a direct meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a diplomatic endeavor strongly encouraged by the Trump administration, consistently collide with a grim and unyielding reality. The foundational objectives of the two nations are fundamentally and existentially incompatible. A face-to-face negotiation between the two leaders is not merely difficult to arrange. It may be conceptually impossible because they are not operating within a shared framework of what a resolution even looks like. For President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people, peace is defined by the restoration of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means the complete withdrawal of all Russian forces from their internationally recognized borders, including Crimea and the Donbass. It also means securing the freedom to choose their own economic and security alliance, a right inherent to any sovereign nation. This vision is rooted in international law and the principle of self-determination. In stark contrast, President Putin's vision for peace involves the formalization of Russia's territorial gain, the constitutional neutering of the Ukrainian state to prevent any future alignment with the West, and the severe limitation of its armed force. This is not a negotiation over a border, but a demand for the partial surrender of Ukrainian sovereignty. There is no discernible middle ground between these two positions. One side is fighting for its existence as an independent nation, while the other is fighting to subordinate that nation to its own sphere of influence. Any direct talks would therefore begin not with a discussion of terms, but with a clash of two irreconcilable worldviews, making a substantive outcome almost unimaginable from the outset. Beyond the chasm in strategic goals, the prospect of direct talks is poisoned by a profound and total lack of trust, particularly from the Ukrainian side. From Kyiv's perspective, Russia has proven itself to be an untrustworthy actor through a long history of broken promise and violated agreement. Ukrainian officials frequently point to the Budapest Memorandum, under which Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security assurance from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom, assurance that proves worthless. They also cite the repeated violations of the Minsk Accord, which were meant to de-escalate the conflict in the Donbass, but were used by Russia to further entrench its control over the region. The sheer brutality of the full-scale invasion, with its widespread and documented atrocities against civilians, has destroyed any remaining possibility of good faith negotiation. President Zelensky cannot realistically be expected to sit across from a leader whose force have laid waste to Ukrainian cities and whom his government has formally accused of being a war criminal. To do so would not only be a personal affront, but also a betrayal of the Ukrainian people's suffering. Furthermore, there is a widely held belief in Kyiv that any ceasefire peace agreement signed by Putin would simply be a tactical pause, an opportunity for Russia to rearm and regroup before launching a new offensive in the future. This deep-seated conviction that Russia cannot be trusted to abide by any treaty it signs makes the entire exercise of direct negotiations seem futile and dangerous to Ukrainian leadership. Adding another layer of complexity are the severe domestic political constraints that box in both leaders, making any significant compromise potentially career-ending, if not life-threatening, proposition. President Zelensky's political legitimacy is inextricably linked to his image as a wartime leader embodying national resistance. Having rallied his country and the world with a narrative of defiance and eventual victory, he has very little room to maneuver. Any move to concede territory or accept a form of neutrality that compromised Ukraine's sovereignty would be seen as a catastrophic betrayal by a large portion of the Ukrainian population and, crucially, by the military. It could trigger massive civil unrest and a complete collapse of national morale, potentially leading to the fall of his government. On the other side, President Putin is similarly trapped by his own rhetoric. He has justified the immense human and economic cost of the war to the Russian people by framing it as an existential struggle against an aggressive West using Ukraine as a proxy. He has staked his entire political legacy on this venture, To end this war without achieving his state primary objective, such as securing a land bridge to Crimea, ensuring Ukrainian neutrality, and being recognized as a victor, would be a monumental humiliation. It would risk emboldening hardline nationalist factions who might see it as a sign of weakness and could destabilize his grip on power. Both leaders are therefore locked into positions from which retreat is politically perilous, making the kind of bold compromise required for peace virtually impossible. Finally, a core obstacle is President Putin's consistent refusal to view President Zelensky and his government as legitimate sovereign counterparts. The Kremlin has long propagated the narrative that Ukraine is not a real country but a historical part of Russia, and that its current government is a puppet regime controlled by Washington. From Putin's perspective, the real negotiation is not with Kyiv but with the United States. He seeks a grand bargain with a fellow great power, a modern-day Yalta conference where he and President Trump would redraw the security map of Eastern Europe, deciding the fate of nations like Ukraine over their heads. This desire to bypass Kyiv and negotiate directly with Washington is a central element of Putin's geopolitical strategy. While President Trump has shown a preference for direct leader-to-leader diplomacy and might be receptive to such a high-stakes summit, the intelligence and national security apparatus of his own government, including Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, would likely advise extreme caution. They would assess that any deal made without the full consent and participation of the Ukrainian government would be inherently unstable and would ultimately fail, leading to a resurgence of conflicts. This fundamental Russian rejection of Ukraine's agency as an independent actor means that even if Putin and Zelensky were in the same room, Putin would not see himself as negotiating with an equal, but rather as dictating terms to a subordinate entity whose patron, the United States, had yet to give its final approval. This dynamic makes a genuine, respectful, and productive dialogue between the two men a near impossibility. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show go in. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched the show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen the show before, you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.